5 matchup, take 3 for Ohio State and take 1 for Indiana. The Buckeyes and the Hoosiers playing at noon on Saturday. I'm Stephen, that's Stefan, and that's Andrew. And these are game picks. Ohio State favored by 13 points, over under 51. Andrew, what's your game score?
Ohio State 35, Indiana 20. One of my favorite 30 for 30s is Survive in Advance. And they give this Jim Valvano look back, and they go into the title game against Big Mighty Houston. And one of the players says, he gives this speech where he goes, after all week saying we're going to hold the ball, we're not going to do, we're playing 5 slam a jam, but we're going to hold the ball. We're not going to do anything. And he gets in the locker room. He goes, we're not going to hold the ball. Are you kidding me? I think Indiana is going to come out swinging. And I think early on, Indiana is going to give Ohio State a really, really good punch. Indiana has had a bye week. They have been sitting there listening to everybody tell them how bad they are, how hypothetically bad they are, what happens in a weird situation where, hey, if they lose by 14 points, they shouldn't make the playoff at 11-1, and we should put in a 3-loss SEC team. Hey, Indiana doesn't deserve to be here. Should Indiana rest its starters so they do this? Should Indiana basically not play the game? There's been so much craziness about Indiana, and I think that matters. And I think Indiana having that week to heal up, they were a little banged up against Michigan, having that week to heal up, having that week of just everybody just ragging on them. I think that matters. I think Indiana is going to show up ready to play. I think Indiana early on is going to throw some big time punches that show you that maybe they belong more than a lot of people think when they just see the helmet. But Ohio State, I just think has too much talent. They just have more talent. I think when it gets to the middle part of this game, towards halftime into the third quarter, I just think you're going to look at it and you're going to see Ohio State going, oh, well, they're the better team. We felt that way about the Penn State game where we talked about that. And we're like, you know what? Ohio State only won by 7 points, but I don't think there was a doubt who was the better team in that game. I think there's not going to be a doubt who's the better team in this game between Ohio State and Indiana. I think Ohio State's going to win by 2 touchdowns. I think that's a cover. That's an over. I like Ohio State to kind of pull away as this game is going on. Indiana's going to make this a 4-quarter game. Indiana has to play all 4 quarters incredibly hard because of the college football playoff consideration. They're trying to get a home game, even if they lose this game. So this, I think, is going to be maybe a little bit closer than some people think. But Ohio State, they're just too good, I think, for Indiana to kind of handle. So we'll see. It's a really fun story. I think this is where the undefeated Indiana season ends.
Mr. Krajisnik, game score.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar vein as Andrew. I'm going Ohio State 31, Indiana 17. That would be the under, but it would be Ohio State covering. I'm with Andrew on a lot of what he said. I think we'll see Indiana come out early and make this a game. I think maybe in the third quarter is when we see, Ohio State maybe grab a 2-score lead. But I think it might be a game similar to the Penn State game where we never really feel like Ohio State has it in doubt, but Indiana continues to kind of throw some punches and keep it close. And maybe late in the fourth quarter, we see Ohio State kind of put up another score that puts the game away officially, puts it on ice. That's a joke about it maybe being cold, but that was terrible. Anyways, I think we'll see a tight game throughout most of it. Somewhere between 7 and 14 points throughout most of the second half. Ultimately, though, I do agree with Andrew. I think Ohio State just has too much talent. I think they're going to be in a decent spot to get Ryan Day a top 5 win. And I want to say right now that if Ryan Day wins this game, it is a top 5 win. No matter what people tell you about Indiana, it is a top 5 win. And if we're going to drag him for losing top 5 games, he does get credit for beating the Penn States, Indianas, and the Notre Dames, even though they're not the Georgias and the Alabamas. So good win for Ohio State, puts them in a good spot going into Michigan week. And I think ultimately it'll be a game that Indiana fans can look at and say IU will still be in the college football playoff hunt based on how they played.
It's supposed to be 49 degrees. If we were in the South, they'd pull out heaters. 38-10, Ohio State wins. I don't think it's close. I think Indiana has some schematic stuff where maybe it's 10-7 at the end of the first quarter, maybe even 7-3 at the end of the first quarter. And it makes I think Indiana gains a little bit of respect on Saturday with the way they scheme some things up. I think some of their players, Michael Kamara and Curtis Rourke specifically, and then some of these receivers, guys gain some respect on Saturday in a way there. The world's going to be watching, even if they have to wake up early to do it. And I do agree, Stefan, that Indiana, even if they're losing by 28 points, which is what I have them losing by, they're a playoff team, in my opinion. And also, I think to your point, Andrew, they're going to try to make this a 4-quarter game because that's what Texas did against Georgia when they were getting their butts kicked. And it's part of the reason why Texas is ranked so highly right now, even if they don't have a win, is because they didn't get blown off the field by Georgia with the final, at least the final score doesn't indicate they did, even though we all know how that game played out. Kind of similar thing with Georgia and Alabama too, right? Where Alabama ultimately wins that game and they were kind of blowing them out and Georgia made it a 4-quarter game. I just don't see that happening. There's just a significant talent drop off. So the scheme, the script stuff, it might last a little bit longer than it does for a lot of the other teams Ohio State's played this season. But eventually, talent is going to start winning this football game, along with the fact that it's not that like Ohio State's coaches are just some pushovers who just roll the ball out there and let their players go play football. They've got two of the smartest offensive lines in the sport, and Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, right? Jim Knowles is one of the smartest minds in the sport defensively, right? So they've got guys too. And I am just wondering if there's been things that we have seen them tweaking the last couple of weeks where we see a more polished product of it on Saturday. When you combine guys who can scheme with guys who have elite talent versus guys who have guys who can scheme and then guys who have decent to good talent, I just don't see where this game is close. It's not quite Michigan State because we're not going to get to halftime and it's 42-0. And we're going, wow, maybe Ohio State's the best team in the country. So we might think that anyway. But I don't think it's going to be like that. But I do think it ends up playing out similarly in terms of Indiana thinks it found its guy. And they gave him a contract extension with a crazy amount of money the week before during a bye week because they think they have their guy. And then they come into Columbus with all this momentum and it maybe gets brought back down to earth a little bit and then realizes, oh, we're very good. We've had a quality year, but let's build off of that versus this just being the top end peak of this era. And unlike with Michigan State, things don't come crashing down and burning within the next 12 months because of some off the field stuff. Those are our game picks. You've got 3 Ohio State guys. I think we have all Ohio State covering, 2 of us taking the under and 1 of us taking the over. If you're watching this on YouTube, there was a full pod before this where we broke down the game and the important parts of it. So go listen to Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts and get the text 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. Ohio State, Indiana, top 5 matchup, 3rd of the season for Ohio State, a spot in the Big Ten championship game to face Oregon on the line, and for Ohio State getting one step closer to clinching their spot, which they couldn't do until they play Michigan next week. For Stefan Krajisnik and for Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means, and that was Buckeye Talk.